Welcome to the Lighthouse Financial Advisors Money Over 50 podcast with Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Lighthouse Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Hello everyone. Today's topic is paying for private school and university. I'll introduce Dallas, who's going to start off.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, this is something that we actually had a debate about this the other day, having a coffee, and so as I do, I then went away and crunched some numbers around what would happen if instead of paying for kids to go to private schools, especially in high school, and then paying for kids to go to university. What if you took that money and invested on their behalf instead? And the reason that we got talking about this is that it's something that we see a lot with our clients, particularly in their late 40s, 50s, coming in to see us. One of the big expenses is those private school fees. And also the cost of sending kids away to uni, and it's a big one that people are thinking about how to fund that, and so I sort of flipped the question a bit, and people tend to, in my mind, assume that it's just a given that if you care about your kids, which everyone does, you want to give them the best possible start in life, and historically the best way to do that has been, I'll send them to the best school, I'll pay for them to go to university, I'll throw money at this as much as possible and hope it gets in the best outcome possible. Now, so to do these quick calculations, I just assumed a cost of $20,000 per year for the 6 years of high school plus 4 years of university. Now, obviously, that is probably a bit of overs for most people based here in Townsville, but I thought that gives us an idea of, if we assume that someone's going to an expensive high school from grade 7 to 12, and then they're being, their living expenses are being paid for them to go away to do a 4-year university degree at a top uni somewhere. So what I've basically said is, if you just didn't do that, if you sent your kid in grade 7 to the local state school, or I don't actually have kids, as you probably can tell by the way that I don't really know what I'm talking about here with a lot of these costs, but you sent your kid to the local state school, assuming no costs at all for that, and then when they finished school, they're on their own, and they either went and got a job, or they went to uni, or whatever, but they funded all of their living needs. If you just took that $20,000 per year and put that away and invested that for them, by the end of that 10 years of their 6 years of high school plus 4 years of uni, they have about $300,000 put aside. So that was kind of obviously not a huge surprise. If you're going to put $20,000 a year away for 10 years, that's $200,000 just in the contributions that you've made. But you've also got, by the end of that 10 years, about $100,000 worth of growth on top of that. So at the end of that 10 years, that kid's 21, they are either freshly out of a university degree, or you would be able to cut them a cheque for $300,000. So that one's a big difference. But then when I extrapolated that further, by age 30, if you didn't cut them a cheque for $300,000, which I think most people at 21, the last thing that you would actually want to do is write a kid a cheque for 300 grand. If you left that invested and then said, okay, at age 30, I want to be able to buy them a house, that would actually be able to grow and tick along in their 20s and be able to buy them a house. So the investment would be worth about $500,000 at that point in time. Even if you assume the average long-term capital growth rate of about 3% for residential property, that would buy them a house worth about $300,000 in today's dollars. So again, in other places that may not be that useful, but in Townsville at the moment, average house price of about $300,000, you can buy a decent house for that. So again, extrapolating that at the end of 10 years, you could cut your kids a cheque for 300 grand. At the age of 30, you could actually just go and pay cash for a house for them. So there's no mortgage. They never have to worry about any of those costs. They've just got a house that's been paid for. The last one that I
won't shoot holes in that, right?
I thought you were actually going to let me get through.
For the purposes of today, we've decided that I'll play devil's advocate. So some of these points I would agree with or strongly agree with, but for the purposes of today, I'm going to challenge Dallas's assumptions. And the first assumption that I'm going to challenge: who wants to pay for their kid's house?
Mate, I'm not telling you should. I'm not saying anyone should be doing these things. I'm just saying that it's possible. It could happen.
So the people that are going to be doing this
Yeah.
are in their 50s now.
Yep.
Maybe 50s, yeah. So their kids will, arguably they've had superannuation for their whole working careers, but their kids will definitely had superannuation for their whole working careers.
Yeah.
And they would have also had probably increased super contributions
They will.
than their parents. And no one gave mum and dad a free house.
Absolutely.
So why should the kids get a free house? They're not going to, without struggle,
Yeah.
there is no progress.
Okay. The whole point of what I'm saying here is I'm not saying that I think particularly the last thing you want to do is give a 21-year-old a cheque for $300,000. What I'm saying is that it's effectively what we're doing, isn't it? By paying for kids' schooling, aren't we investing in their human capital so that they can then, get a better job, higher income, all those types of things. If that's the point of what we're trying to do here, is pay for our kids to go to school, go to uni, to be able to earn more income, why don't we just cut the middleman out? Why don't we just invest the money on their behalf and cut them a cheque or buy them a house or whatever the case may be?
I think a big part of paying for education is that you want your children to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and to find rewarding careers, to basically find careers that they're going to pay them enough and also be something that they like to do as well. Plus learn some other lessons as well, and learn some other lessons on their own 2 feet. I question giving children any type of monetary.
I question it as well. What I also question though is the whole concept of, as you're saying, these lessons, or so no one paid for you to go to university, for example.
No, and it's a really interesting point. So, and I said I was going to play devil's advocate. I'm actually going to agree with you on this point. So, I think once you get to university, so you're an adult at that point in time.
Yeah.
You're a young adult. My opinion there is that you should, being an adult, you should pay for your own university.
Yeah.
And in Australia, I mean, we have a reasonably easy to fund system, which is the HECS and the health system. Right. So I mean, you obviously borrow the money and you end up with a debt once you graduate. You are taxed extra amounts, but it's not the true form of tax which just goes to the government.
Yeah.
The extra 5 or the extra 6 or the extra 7% that you tax, depending on what income you earn, with a HECS debt or a health debt, as they call it now, actually goes to paying that debt off.
Yeah.
And my thoughts are that you would generally value your uni degree if you know that you're paying for it yourself. Yeah. And you would generally put in the work that was required to make it a success. Yeah. If your parents are just paying your way,
they're less likely to.
You're less likely to.
Yeah. It's like anything. It's not to say that no one would do that, and that. But so there's already a middle ground somewhere, which is sort of I guess if you said, okay, well, I want them to go to a really good high school, and in those formative years of their teenage years, I want them to be around the right people and around in the right environment. So you could have it both ways a bit there and say, right, well, I'll pay a bit overs for them to go to a really good high school, but once you leave school, you're on your own, and I'm paying for and you're not paying for anything. I'm going to take that $20,000 that I would have paid to send you to uni or to fund your living expenses. You go and get a part-time job. You do it however you need to. I'll invest that on your behalf. So it doesn't. Obviously, that's not going to have the same financial effect as putting $20,000 aside a year for 10 years. But you're right. That is a point where you could just take those last years and have apply the same sort of concept. I guess the point there is what we're sort of already getting to, is that we don't actually we debate this back and forwards within the office. There's no real right or wrong answer. It's completely different based on the attitude of the kid, the school that we're talking about, the university, depending on your what your beliefs are as a parent. All those things apply here. My concept is this is not something that people tend to even debate. It's just accepted that, well, we should send them to the most expensive school that we can and the most expensive university we can, because that's the best way to give them a start.
So you have some questions here that you would believe that people should be looking at before actually making that automatic decision.
Well, and that's, like I say, is that it may well be that people think about all this and still decide that that's the right course of action. But it's one that, as a soon-to-be new parent, I think about this, is that what is it that people are actually hoping to achieve by sending their kids to private school or paying for their kids to go to uni? And that's, as you touched on there, it's not necessarily just about marketable skills in the workforce or anything like that. It may well be about in an environment that they want them to interact with other people. They want them to, you had a story about when you were in high school and the teachers that you had there.
Yeah, and teachers come and go, obviously, and retire. But I had some very good teachers. I didn't go to a private school per se. I went to a Christian Brothers, all boys Catholic school, which I found really, really good for both academic and sport and mentorship, in that a lot of the ex-students of the school, and it's more so now, have gone and become teachers there. However, like I said, I really enjoyed it. I had no other benchmark though. I mean, I could have quite easily just enjoyed any other school.
This is the problem with a lot of. I think a lot of the time the decision that gets made here is that you don't get to run around and try it again and do it somewhere else. And so that's the attitude that I think people tend to have, and it makes sense, is to go, our kids only get one shot at high school and at those formative years. So we don't know whether there's value added by sending them to a prestigious school or to an expensive school, but why roll the dice? So my concept here is not to say that you shouldn't care about your kids' future and that you shouldn't be trying to do what's best for them. It's just that there is a cost benefit trade off that needs to be made, and you give me a hard time about being like Spock out of Star Trek all the time. And this is the way that my brain works, is that if we're trying to give kids the best outcome, if it's a purely financial thing we're looking at and trying to get them into the best position to get the highest paid job, I think that more and more now that type of education is maybe not as valuable as what it used to be. The job market, the economy changes all the time. The skills that someone needed 50 years ago are probably just not the same anymore, and I've got no doubt that the skills that people are learning in schools right now are probably going to be very different than what's needed in the economy in 10, 20 years' time. So is the most efficient way to put our kids in the best possible situation to pay for them to go to this private school, or is it to actually allocate that money elsewhere? And so, like as you were saying, you probably don't want to cut a check for a kid for 300,000 or buy them a house or whatever. What if you took that money, put it into an account and said, okay, well, from 20 to 30, there's money there that's set aside. If you decide that you want to start a business or do something like that, you can use some of that money to do it.
I understand why you've done this, because you need to be able to quantify this.
Exactly.
So I can understand why you've said that.
That's what the
to
cost
quantify
is.
it at age 30, instead of putting that money into paid education, they could have the free education, which, let's face it, our free education system is fantastic. If you go around the world and
you're just trying to stay on side of all the teachers who are listening.
I always think it's a miracle we've been born in Australia. It's an absolute miracle.
Yeah.
So we're only 20 million out of the 7 billion.
Yep.
And it's just a miracle. We've all been born here.
Yeah.
So we're that far ahead if you measure other countries around the world in terms of our health system and education system that's provided to us.
Yeah.
It is excellent. So there's I understand why you come back to the money side of things, because if you're comparing, okay, well, if you went to a non-paid education provider and actually put that money, you have to quantify that somewhere.
Exactly.
I'm playing devil's advocate because I think there's other uses for that money. If you decide that the use isn't to pay for your child or children's education, there are other uses for that money. But I'll let you continue on with your.
I guess that's the point of what we've debated this in the office for hours, and we'll probably continue to do so. There's no right answer here, but the thought that I kind of want people to take away from today is that there's a cost and a benefit to everything, obviously. So the cost of sending your kid to a expensive high school and to expensive university, you can quantify that as it costs $20,000 a year. Now, what's the benefit of that? We don't know. If people are doing that, you just hope that they have made that as an informed decision and thought through, what do I think the benefits of this education will be, and do they outweigh the costs of that? The same thing applies for, I guess, the flip side of that, though, is that what I'm saying is that if you didn't send that, didn't pay for those education expenses, the cost is that child might miss out on potentially some of the advantages of going to that private school or going to that university. But the benefit is also something that needs to be quantified. And so it's not a simple as should I pay for my kid's education or should I just blow that money. This is kind of what I'm raising as a thought exercise, is that there's a middle ground here, is to say, okay, if I wanted to be able to help my kids out, is paying for that education the most effective use of that cash to be able to do so. So in an extreme example, what I actually calculated here is to say that same thing applied. If you put that $20,000 a year aside for 10 years and then said, okay, that my child isn't allowed to touch that until they're age 60. So that just sits there in their super fund or ticking along in the background. They haven't had the benefit of this great education, so they still have to go out in the workforce and find their own way and earn an income to live off until age 60. But by the time they get to age 60, they'd have just over $3 million just from this cash that's been put aside. Now, obviously, by that point in time, inflation will have raised prices by a fair bit. It actually works out that at 3%, inflation will have raised prices by 4 times by then. So something that would cost $1,000 now would cost $4,000 at that point in time. But even allowing for inflation, that amount of money would provide a retirement income of $50,000 per year in today's dollars, pretty much through until age 90. So what I'm saying is that not paying for their education and putting that money aside completely funds their retirement, which is a big component of what people are working for, is to try and save money, put that aside for retirement.
Let me tell you what's happening. The child or the children know that their retirement's going to be enhanced by $3 million by age 60.
So they don't save anything.
They don't save anything. Instead of living in a $500,000 house, they buy a $1.5 million house. They don't pay it off. They finance a Maserati. They spend that money the whole of their life before it's due.
That may be true. That may be true.
So again, I know you have to quantify it, and it's a staggering number. I don't doubt that. It's a staggering number. If you look at it in those terms, $20,000 a year times 10 years, $200,000 of total money going into education. If it went into their superannuation fund, they'd have over $3 million. Is that right?
Yep. Over $3 million.
Yeah. So it's a staggering figure.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely staggering figure, and it just shows you how compounding does work over that period of time.
Yep.
And I understand that you've had to have quantified it, and it does provide some perspective.
Now,
it's a terrible thing to do. It's a terrible thing to do. You're ruining your children. You're absolutely ruining.
So think about this from the perspective of for anyone who's listening and is in this position where, say, they're 50 years old, for example, and they're thinking of they're trying to fund their kids' education. If you're 50 right now, and you went, okay, I don't have to think about my retirement savings. My retirement savings were already seeded. If you're 50 years old and your education was paid for when you were a kid, your university was paid for, all those types of things, are you sitting there now going, I'm glad that all that was paid for me? Or are you sitting there going, geez, I kind of just wish that my parents had put that money aside for me and I didn't have to worry about my retirement income? And I'm not saying that that's what would happen. I'm just saying it is a situation that you could be in.
I think giving anyone anything beyond the point in time that they become an adult is very dangerous.
Yeah.
I think it's dangerous, and
No.
the danger is that you take this isn't the best analogy, but you make a wild animal captive, and it relies upon that. It relies upon the food that you hand it out all the time. So, I mean, I think with anything like that, there is a danger to giving your children money. I mean, there are variations of that. Variations are, hey, you guys, we have a fund over here. Now, if you want to buy a house, we will fund you dollar for dollar. So, rather than paying cash for a house at age 30, in your example, you say, okay, well, if you guys save, $150,000, we'll match that with $150,000 in that respect. So,
but this now gets into that's I guess a whole other topic that again we've spent hours debating and will forever, which is how best to teach your kids about money and the value of money and the value of being a contributing member of society, all those types of things. What I'm saying is you could just skip all that entirely. So the example you use of the wild animal in captivity is that what I'm proposing is to say that I'm not saying that you fund that child's lifestyle from 21 onwards. I'm just saying you go, okay, well, I don't know what you will need when you turn 21, when you're out in the big bad world. I don't know if the skills that you're learning at school or the university degree you're doing, I don't know if that's going to be valuable to you. What I do know is going to be valuable is an investment that's sitting there tucked away. That money is the ultimate commodity.
It is. It's easy to quantify.
For anything.
It is easy to quantify the comparison then, because you're saying that you don't do this and you get X amount of dollars.
Yes.
It's a really easy.
Yeah.
It's a really easy one to quantify. Is it in the best interest of the child? Well, it could be. The answer is it could be.
Yeah.
If the child or children have the right attitude and have the parents have discussed money with them and they have a healthy relationship with money, it could be the right answer. It certainly could be. Yeah. So it all depends, of course. Like anything, it depends.
Yeah. I think that also ties into one of the points, which is that, as I was saying before, what is it that people are hoping to achieve by sending their kids to private school, to uni, all the rest of it? in reality, the types of people that are thinking about this for their kids are probably going to be the types of people that are also going to be teaching their kids the importance of working hard, the value of money, all these types of things. So what I would sort of say there is that your argument that kids learn other things not related to marketable skills, but they learn different things about how to behave or how to fit into society. The types of people that are sending their kids to these schools are probably the types of people that are going to do the work with their kids to teach them those things regardless. So,
and there's a third option. We probably don't have too much time to go into it, but the third option is that you take the $20,000 a year and you buy time with your children.
That's a great point.
So that $20,000 per year would buy you time. Either you work 0.8 of the year, or you take a day off a week, or you save that money up and you move overseas for a year, and the children are immersed in the French culture or the New Zealand culture or the Italian culture, or wherever it is.
New Zealand doesnn't have culture, so but yes, that's
there are variations of that.
But that's a great point. Is that it's not necessarily to say that a mate of mine, Jimmy Brownlee, always says to me that my answer to everything is to put it in super. So I've obviously compared here putting the money, paying for schooling, or putting the money into super. But that's the extreme.
I understand why you've done that, because it's easy to quantify.
Yeah, but as you say, you could well say that $20,000 a year, rather than spending that on either spending it on schooling or putting it into an investment on their behalf, you could say, right, this year we're going to take a child to India and volunteer there, and he's going to learn about true poverty, and he's going to be grateful for the world that he's grown up in, all those kinds of things. So there is definitely a middle ground there as to what you can do. The point that I guess I'm now going to pretend that you've made my point for me, even though you kind of haven't, which is that there is a trade-off that needs to be made with that money, and that at some stage the amount that you're paying for school fees, or to pay for university, or to pay for any of those types of things, there is always an opportunity cost for that, which is what else could that be used for. And that's, it's a bit of an extreme case. We've assumed $20,000 per year. For a lot of situations, it's going to be much less than that. But I would say that there's, at some stage there's a cost per year that just isn't going to be, it's no longer worth it to spend that money on that education. So it might be, depending on, like we said, what your child's aptitude or attitude, or what schooling you're tossing up. Obviously if the school fees are going to be $40,000 a year versus $4,000 a year, there's a big variation there. It's just another way to think of it, is to go, okay, well, maybe I don't spend $20,000 a year on private school fees. Maybe I find a good Christian Brothers school that makes an upstanding citizen like Michael out of you, and I spend $4,000 a year. And so I've got that $16,000 a year to, put aside, or to spend on some of those experiences, or, as you say, to buy time, to not have to work as hard, and to be able to spend more time with your kids. And those are all trade-offs that need to be made.
This topic's reminded me of an SBS film. You watch an SBS film and it goes around and around and around. There's a beginning and a middle, and then it just ends. And you think, it can't possibly be over. Nothing's been resolved.
Nothing's been resolved, yeah.
So I think it's been a really interesting topic. I don't think we can wrap up.
No.
We can't even wrap up. We're just going to end.
No, that's basically it. And no doubt we'll continue discussing this and debating and arguing about this till the end of days. But hopefully that has at least gotten your poor listeners involved in this debate, and just given us something to think about in terms of the opportunity cost of the trade-off, or the other options that are available to you. So I guess we could pretend that's put a nice bow on it, and we'll stop there.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Lighthouse Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.